Welcome to our instructional video about the anatomy of the frog. Today, we're gonna discuss about the internal and external morphology of the frog. Moreover, different body systems associated with animal movement, support, and nutrition will be further discussed.
In introductory subjects, especially the ones dealing with the study of anatomy and physiology of an animal, frogs are commonly used as the representative animals. Wanna know why? There are three main reasons.
First, it is a convenient, cheap, and readily available specimen. Among the 7 continents, Antarctica is the only one where frogs cannot survive. Commonly, frogs live in freshwater habitats that keep their skin moist for survival, which is why they are found in ponds, lakes, rivers, or places near them. Other moist places where they could be found are rainforests, trees, woods, and even mountains.
Second, frogs have an easily observable life cycle. About 6 to 21 days, hatched frog eggs could develop into small tadpoles which will then eventually develop into mature frogs. Their ecological status is safe because of their ability to reproduce fast.
Lastly, frogs, compared to other smaller forms of animals, have an exemplary morphology that somehow resembles the structures of other higher forms of animals and even humans.
With these reasons, we could say that frogs could definitely help us in studying our own structures indeed.
Are you stuck in the problem? Here to give an answer. I'm sure you're gonna learn them, and things would be much better. Is it to teach you all yourself? Or should the body organize? Zoology is made it seem this is for you and me. Let's go. Zoology is for you and me, for you and me. So while you sit and watch me, I keep teaching you more, keep teaching you more. Not again, your body knows what we say. It's about the animals and not in a different way. Let's go. Zoology is for you and me, for you and me.
Fun fact! The species of the frog that we're about to use in this video is the field frog, also commonly known as the boy-swart frog and Asian grass frog. It is commonly found in the region of Southeast Asia and Indochina.
It is characterized by its brown dark markings as well as the patches in its back and its white ventral side. It commonly lives in moist areas like palayan fields. It belongs to its domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Amphibia, order Anura, family Vanidae, genus Rana, and differ in its species. So before we officially finish our introduction, we will now define some anatomical terms that you might encounter in this instructional video.
We're going to use the word dorsal, which is the back part of the frog. It came from the Latin word dorsum, which means back. And the opposite of the dorsal side is the ventral side, which actually came from the Latin word ventrum. The ventral is the front part of the organism.
So as you can see, this is the dorsal view of the frog.
And this is the ventral side of the frog.
Though in some references, they are considered similar to dorsal and ventral view, however, anterior and posterior are terms which are used to describe the position of a part with respect to another body part.
If a body part is said to be anterior from its reference point, it means that it is located near its front, while if it is posterior, then it means that it is located further back in the position of the reference point or near the rear or its hind end.
Do not get confused with the anatomical parts. The dorsal and ventral are just the back and front view, respectively, of the body itself, whereas anterior and posterior are descriptions to show the position of a part with respect to another part. This requires a reference point.
Lateral and medial, meanwhile, are used to describe body parts, with the midline of the body as a reference point. The farther it is from the line, it becomes lateral, where medial is described as closer to the midline.
So, guys, are you ready?
Let's start!
The external morphology of the frog focuses on all body parts that are seen on the outside of the frog without opening it. It pays to know the two major regions. These include the axial region, comprising of the head and the trunk, and the appendicular region, constituted by the appendages or the limbs.
So let us start with the skin. Though it is seen all throughout the body, this serves as one of the most important external organs of the frog, which allows for the maintenance of equilibrium and passage of water. It allows the frog to absorb water and hydrate itself. Frogs rarely use their tongues to drink.
Fun fact again! Did you know that you can observe the pigmentations under the mouth of a frog to identify its sex? Females have diffuse skin pigmentations under their mouth, while males have more dark pigmented areas. Amazing, isn't it?
Sure do! But now, let us continue with the snout. The snout is a triangular protruding region of the frog head.
Also, at the tip of the head is the mouth, which is a large anterior opening of the head with a teeth and tongue.
The nostrils or external nares, singular nares, are two small openings near the tip of the snout which allows the exchange of gases with the environment.
Posterior to the external nares are the eyes, found each on both left and right side of the head. These have upper eyelid, lower eyelid, and the third eyelid called as nictitating membrane.
In front of the eyes is the so-called brow spot, which is described as a lightly colored spot at the median dorsal part of the head.
Similar to an ear, the tympanic membrane, also known as tympanum, is a small, round, sound-transmitting arc of thickened membrane behind each eye, allowing a frog to hear both in the air and underwater.
Next is the median dorsal line, which is a vertical line that divides the frog symmetrically into left and right side. A marked elevation on the surface of the median dorsal line is called the hump. It is located near the posterior end of the body.
Lastly, the anus is a small opening at the dorsal end of the trunk, which serves for the exit of reproductive cells, excretory products, and undigested food matter.
Let's make an acronym for the axial parts. Remember this: EMA's best, where the first letter E stands for eye, two letter M's for the median dorsal line and mouth, A for anus, S for skin, B stands for brow spot, another letter E for external nares, S for snout, and finally, T for tympanic membrane.
The appendicular parts of the frog, meanwhile, are consisted of the forelimbs and the hind limbs.
There are two forelimbs on the anterior end of the trunk, consisting of the upper arm, the forearm, wrist or carpus, and the hand or manus with 4 digits or fingers. The digits could indicate if a frog is a male or female. Usually, frogs with swollen thumbs are male. If not, they are considered females.
Lastly, two hind limbs of the posterior end of the trunk consist of the thighs, shank or middle portion, ankles or tarsus, webbed toes, and a sixth toe called the pre-hallux. The sixth toe is felt on the inner side of the foot near the most proximal toe, the hallux.
In memorizing the appendicular parts, remember this. Writing has upgraded for previous websites and sharp thinkers.
Before we continue, we've got a question for you. Now going back to the external morphology of the frog, what do you call the two small openings near the tip of the snout which allows gas exchange from the environment? Is it the nose, external nares or nostrils, or the snoot? The correct answer is the external nares or the nostrils.
The muscular system constitutes the flesh of the frog body. These are used for movement. Technically, all body movements are a result of muscle contraction, and the muscles are very important for the locomotion and for body support. There are several important terms with which you need to get familiarized with. These include the origin, the insertion, and the belly. The origin is the attachment site that does not move during contraction, while the insertion is farther from the body, more movable, and may be connected to another bone or tendon. The part of the muscle between the origin and insertion is called the belly. Several muscles have words like flexors, extensors, and adductors. Flexors are muscles that enable a part to be bent, while extensors are responsible for straightening the parts. Lastly, adductors cause a part to be brought closer to the medial line of the body. We shall divide the muscle groups according to their location. The ventral muscles are those found in the ventral side of the frog, while opposite to them are the dorsal muscles. However, note that some of the lateral muscles can be visible on both sides and that some other muscles are overlapping or located under other muscles, so pay attention. This might take a long trip. Let's go back to Sarah and Gab.
The first for the ventral muscles is the submentalis. It is a transverse, small muscle at the tip of the jaw which triggers the tongue to stick out for captivating prey.
Next to it is the mylohyoid muscle, which is a very thin sheet of muscle located posterior to the submentalis. Underneath it is the geniohyoid, necessary for depressing the mandible to open the mouth.
Posterior to the lower jaw of the frog is a muscle located at the portion of the sternum. This is the sternoradialis. It is connected with the deltoid and contributes significantly to muscular responses during frog mating.
The muscle of the upper arm, also known as the deltoid or the scapulohumeralis, is located posterior to the sternoradialis.
The pectoralis muscles are located at the anterior trunk and are divided into three types: the pectoralis epicoracoideum or anterior pectoralis, pectoralis sternalis or the middle pectoralis, and pectoralis abdominis or the posterior pectoralis. The cutaneous pectoralis, meanwhile, is a term used to describe the superficial layer of the pectoralis muscles.
Moving on, we now have the rectus abdominis. It is a thin, flat muscle forming the ventral abdominal wall of the frog.
At the lateral side of the frog is where external oblique could be found. It is a thin muscle sheet covering most of the sides of the body. It could be seen both in dorsal and ventral view. Under it is another muscle named transversus abdominis. It is responsible for stabilizing lower back and pelvis before movements in arms and legs occur.
Moreover, the abdominal wall of the frog has segmentally arranged connective tissue septa known as the inscriptiones tendinae. Furthermore, the line that vertically divides the part into two sections, the left and the right, is called the linea alba.
Let's move down to the ventral side of the body. The gracilis or rectus internus muscles, namely the gracilis minor and gracilis major. These are some of the muscles forming the thigh. The gracilis minor is seen both in the dorsal and ventral side. It makes up the innermost side of the thigh, while gracilis major, next to the gracilis minor, is seen only in the ventral side.
Another muscle named as semitendinosus is seen only in the ventral view. It is located under the gracilis major. It should not be taken into confusion with the semimembranosus muscle, as semitendinosus is a deep muscle while semimembranosus is a superficial muscle, which will be discussed later on.
Two adductor muscles named adductor magnus and adductor longus are located on both the ventral view of the thigh between the gracilis major and triceps femoris. The adductor longus is the outer muscle covered by a ribbon-like muscle known as sartorius. The adductor magnus is the inner muscle whose lower portion is partially covered only by the sartorius.
Next is the triceps femoris, also seen both in dorsal and ventral side. It is the outermost muscle covering the outside of the thighs. It has three origins, two from the ventral side, namely the vastus internus and rectus femoris anticus, and one from the dorsal side, namely the vastus externus.
The muscles of the shank connect the muscles of the thigh and the feet of the frog. These provide strength along with the thighs to provide a balanced locomotion to the frog.
Moving down to the shank and feet, first is the large muscle that covers the inner side of the shank that could be seen in the dorsal and ventral side. This is the gastrocnemius, which is connected to the tendon of Achilles.
The tendon of Achilles is a large tendon that passes over the ankle joint and spreads out over the ventral surface of the foot.
Tibialis anticus and tibialis posticus are muscles of the shank which allow pulling of the foot toward the shin bone and twisting the ankles respectively.
Next, extensor cruris. It is a small muscle crowded against and almost fused to the upper two-thirds of the outer side of the tibiofibula. And last, for the ventral muscles, flexor tarsi anterior is the small muscle below the extensor cruris.
Felt overloaded memorizing the muscles on the ventral side of the frog? So message Pip, Pest, and Pretzel. Grace semi-formally addressed Trisa's very tentative speech to the event's families and guests. Perhaps that you should have remembered it easier, right? Once you flip the frog to the other side, you could notice that there are many more visible muscles that could be seen on the dorsal side. Let's discuss them one by one.
Let us start with the pterygoides. The pterygoides is located posterior to the eye and is one of the most anterior muscles of the frog.
Moving down a little bit, you could see the temporalis. It is only seen in the dorsal side and is a bulge of muscle located beside the tympanic membrane. It originates from the mid-dorsal line and is inserted to the posterior mandible.
Next to it is the depressor mandibulae, which is a fan-shaped muscle located posterior to the temporalis.
A muscle of the neck ocularis is responsible for connecting the head to the pectoral girdle of the frog.
Meanwhile, the muscle attached to the shoulder bone located underneath the depressor mandibulae is what we call dorsalis scapula.
Latissimus dorsi is described as a broad muscle whose fibers run latitudinally or horizontally meeting the mid-dorsal line. Posterior to it are muscles that longitudinally or vertically run along the vertebral column. These are called as the longissimus dorsi.
As one goes down to the trunk of the frog, more muscles are attached, especially to the bones of the spine. Iliolumbaris is an example of this. This is a group of connective tissues that supports the lower lumbar spine.
Another one is the coccygiosacralis, which is a diagonal muscle located posterior to the iliolumbaris.
Next is the coccygia-iliacus, described as a muscle below the longissimus dorsi, attached to the urostyle and iliac bones.
Looking at the posterolateral side of the coccygia-iliacus is a small muscle called gluteus.
Lastly, there exists a transverse muscle located between the two thighs of the frog. This is called the piriformis.
The counterpart of the gracilis major on the other side is the semimembranosus. It also covers the inner surface of the dorsal thigh, but could be slightly seen in the ventral view.
Biceps femoris is a narrow muscle lying between the semimembranosus and triceps femoris at the dorsal side.
Last but not the least, peroneus is the only other muscle beside the gastrocnemius on the dorsal side of the shank.
Compared to the ventral muscles, dorsal muscles are in fact quite less numerous. To remember it, we suggest memorizing this sentence: Terry, deaf, close the door. Later, I'll get the lonely coconut. P.S. Be present. Just to recap, there are some muscles which can be seen both in the dorsal and ventral side. Take note of them. These are all present in the acronym GT, GT, ST, ET. Gracilis minor, transversus abdominis, gastrocnemius, triceps femoris, semimembranosus, tendon of Achilles, external oblique, and tibialis anticus.
Now we've got another question for you. We've tackled about the different muscles of the frog, may it be dorsal or ventral side. So for the ventral side of the frog, what do you call the thin, flat muscle that forms the ventral abdominal wall of the frog? Is it the rectus abdominis, the femoris, or is it the deltoid? The correct answer for that is the rectus abdominis. Now let us call Franz to discuss the latter part.
After discussing both the external morphology of the frog and the muscular system, we shall now open the frog to reveal more of the internal organs. Several organ systems, aside from muscular and skeletal systems, could be seen at the internal part of the frog. We shall discuss and generalize the three main organ systems, namely the cardiovascular system, respiratory system, and the digestive system. Let us start with the cardiovascular system. This system has the heart as its main organ, which functions for circulating different materials in and out of the blood, which is the vascular tissue. Like in higher forms of animals, the cardiovascular system is very essential as it is where other organ systems like respiratory system depends.
The essential organ for circulation is the heart. As you open the body of the frog, it is a slightly easily seen part, along with the lungs and liver in the anterior part. It is made up of 3 chambers and is made up of cardiac muscle tissues. It is present in the upper part of the body.
The respiratory system, meanwhile, is a network of organs responsible for providing oxygen to the frog for the purpose of respiration.
Aside from the skin, a pair of elongated, Sac-like lungs present in the trunk region are used by the frog for respiration. It is similar to the lungs of higher forms of animals, which has similar structures and functions as well.
Fun fact: as frogs use their skin to breathe, it has to be kept moist at all times. The slimy substance that one might feel when holding a frog is due to the mucus substances that they secrete. This mucus substance is needed because if a frog is not moist, it would not be able to breathe using their skin. This is a primary reason why frogs, not toads, have slimy, moist skin.
We shall now proceed to the digestive system. The digestive system is a well-developed organ system made up of the alimentary canal and digestive glands. The digestive system of a frog is similar in most respects to that other vertebrates. There are some differences with respect to the digestive systems of humans and frogs. An example would be the absence of salivary glands. In response to this, the large mouth of buccal cavity of the frog secretes mucus for lubricating the food, unlike the higher animals which have saliva made from the salivary glands.
There are two major parts in the digestive system. These include the alimentary canal and accessory glands. Let us start with the alimentary canal. The tube-like esophagus connects from the mouth and opens into the stomach.
The food is digested in the stomach by the action of hydrochloric acid and other gastric juices that are secreted.
When the food from the stomach is broken down into simpler substances, it will enter the small intestine where it is absorbed and assimilated.
Continuing the process, after passing through the small intestine, the undigested food proceeds to the large intestine.
The undigested food could be in the form of solid waste, where it will be excreted in the anus.
Associated with the alimentary canal are the accessory glands that secrete digestive juices that help in the digestion of food. These include the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas.
The liver of the frog has three lobes: the right, the left anterior, and the left posterior lobe. Similar to higher forms of animals, the liver secretes bile.
The secreted bile of the liver is then stored by the gallbladder.
In addition for that, the pancreas secretes pancreatic juices necessary for the digestion of food.
And lastly, fat bodies are areas in the body containing the stored energy for hibernating, mating, and metamorphosis.
In order to memorize the different parts more effectively, I have prepared an acronym just for you. The air, the lion, and the elephant love singing, going to picnics, learning salsa, and feeding the alligator. Where H stands for heart, L for lungs, E for esophagus, L for liver, S for stomach, G for gallbladder, P for pancreas, L for large intestine, S for small intestine, F for fat bodies, and A for anus.
Maybe we should do another recap. So we have mentioned earlier the internal organs of the frog and the process involved in the digestion of food. Now, where do you think the food goes after it is broken down by the stomach? A. The small intestine, B. The pancreas, or C. The large intestine? That's right, the small intestine.
The skeleton is an essential part of the body machine of every vertebrate animal.
A frog's body is built for jumping and swimming.
Even though frogs don't look much like human on the outside, their skeletons are similar to human skeleton. But the frog skeleton isn't so similar to a human skeleton once you get past the extremities. Frogs have skulls but don't have necks, so they can turn, lift, or lower their head like people can. A frog also doesn't have ribs. The rib-like structures are part of their spine. The skeletal system of the frog consists of many sets of bones which are responsible for locomotion, for serving as a point of attachment, and for supplying calcium to the blood. It is an important system because it enables an organism to stay firm and allow movement, which is a characteristic of life. Furthermore, we will divide the discussion into 4 parts. We have the bones of the skull, the bones of the vertebra, the bones of the pelvic and the pectoral girdle, and the bones of the appendages. Let us start with the dorsal view of the skull.
The premaxilla is the most anterior bone in the frog as it bears the anteriormost teeth which forms the tip of the upper jaw. It is seen both on the dorsal and ventral side of the frog.
Posterior to the premaxilla is the maxilla, also known as the upper jaw. It is involved in the formation of the orbit, nose, and the palate. It also holds the upper teeth and is also seen both in the dorsal and ventral view.
A pair of slim bones that forms the rear lower corner of the skull is known as the quadratojugals. It is seen on both dorsal and ventral side. It connects to the jugal from the front and to the squamosal from above.
Another pair of slim bones is the frontoparietal. It is united at the median line by the sagittal suture. A suture is a type of fibrous joint only found in the skull. The bones only permit a small amount of movement and are bound together by Sharpie's fibers.
Another example of a suture in frogs is the median dorsal suture, which is an immovable suture that can be found in the middle of the frontoparietals.
Located in front of the parasphenoid bone, the spinethmoid is a small squarish bone that serves as a brain case that connects the olfactory nerves and entire optic parts of the fore and midbrain.
The triangular bones that cover the nasal capsules, meanwhile, are called nasals.
Next is the socket of the skull, in which the eye and its appendages are situated. This is called eye socket, or more formally known as the orbital fossa. It is seen both on dorsal and ventral side of the skull.
A pair of ring-like projection on each side of the skull that forms the auditory capsule enclosing the inner ear is called the prootic bone.
A pair of T-shaped bones that is lateral to the prootic bone is called the squamosals. Its ends extend outward and backward to the lower jaw.
At the end of the skull, there is a protrusion on the occipital bone that forms a joint with the first cervical vertebra, enabling the head to move relative to the neck. This is called the occipital condyle.
The passage of the central nervous system through the skull is made possible by the foramen magnum. It connects the brain to the spinal cord.
Lastly, a pair of bones lying on each side of the foramen magnum is called as ex-occipital.
Let us flip to the ventral view of the frog skull. In this part, one can see some other bones, especially the bones of the upper and lower jaw.
Premaxillary teeth and maxillary teeth are connected to the premaxilla and maxilla respectively. These are sets of teeth that help the frog hold its prey.
Metamecalion is a bone of the lower jaw, and it unites the right and the left halves of the jaw.
Posterior to it is the dentary, a pair of membrane bones that forms the distal part of the lower jaws.
And lastly, the innermost part of the mandible or the lower jaw is called angulosplenial.
Moving forward, a third set of teeth, known as the vomerine teeth, is attached to the vomer, which is a thin, rough, triangular plate of bone on the nasal cavity. It separates the nasal cavities into left and right sides.
There are two irregular facial bones found posterior to the nasal cavity. This is called as palatine, which lies between the maxilla and the pterygoid of the sphenoid bone.
Meanwhile, the parasphenoid is an unpaired dermal bone which lies at the midline of the roof of the mouth. It is a dagger-shaped bone that forms the floor of the skull.
The pterygoid mentioned earlier is a paired bone forming part of the palate of many vertebrates behind the palatine bones.
Just a recap, here are the following dorsal bones of the skull. Keep in mind this sentence. Sid got mad because Cody and Sam failed to prepare and sort the oranges and pears equally. For the ventral view, remember the sentence. Maxima, Mom, Dad, Angelo, please prepare the ripe mangoes and put it in the oven, Raj said. The vertebral column has almost the same structure when viewed from the dorsal and the ventral view. However, compared to other bones, this part is much complicated as there are very small parts which may not be totally seen if the bones are fused. Nevertheless, we will discuss them one by one. Let us start first with the easily seen parts.
The atlas is the first vertebra and the topmost bone sitting just below the skull. It articulates with the skull through the occipital condyle, ex-occipital, and foramen magnum.
Below the atlas are the second to eighth vertebra of the frog. They are called the typical vertebra, as they are similar in structures compared to the atlas, the first vertebra, and the ninth and the 10th vertebra.
Projections on the mid-dorsal part, collinear to the vertebra, is known as the neural spine. It serves as a point of attachment to muscles and ligaments.
The post-zygapophysis is a pair of articulating processes at the posterior end of the neural arc. A superior process known as pre-zygapophysis projects upward from a lower vertebra, while the post-zygapophysis, an inferior process, projects downward from a higher vertebra.
Small bony projection of the left and right sides of each vertebra is known as the transverse process, which also functions as the site of attachment for muscles and ligaments of the spine.
The ninth vertebra is known as the sacral vertebra. It functions to articulate securely with the pelvic girdle, and they are usually fused from a single bone to provide a firm support.
The 10th vertebra is characterized as a long and segmented bone that represents a number of fused vertebrae and forms the posterior part of the vertebral column. This is called as the urostyle.
Moving into the deeper parts of the isolated vertebra, there are three important parts that one needs to know.
Let us start with the neural arc, also called as the posterior vertebral arc. It is formed by the fusion of two small stalk-like structures called as pedicles and two thin plate scales or layer called as laminae. Along with the back portion of the vertebral body, the neural arc forms a vertebral foramen through which the spinal cord passes.
The cavity enclosed by the neural arc, meanwhile, is called as neural canal. And lastly, a large anterior middle portion of the vertebra's body is known as the centrum.
To memorize the bones of the vertebral column together with the isolated vertebra, Nurse Aster and Nana made and preserved a poster of a rose. They used the tape and placed it near the sea. Use this sentence to make memorizing easier. The pectoral girdle together with the sternum forms an arc of bones and cartilage around the anterior portion of the trunk. It is divided into right and left half.
Now let us start with the anterior-most bone. This is called the episternum. It is the topmost part, which is a thin, almost circular plate of a cartilage.
Posterior to it is the omosternum, which is a tapered bone attached anteriorly to the epicoracoid.
The posterior counterpart of the omosternum is the mesosternum. It is a bony rod and it is correspondingly connected to the epicoracoid.
The symphysternum, meanwhile, located posterior to the mesosternum, is the lowest part of the sternum.
A cartilage at the proximal end of the clavicle and the coracoid is called the epicoracoid. Meanwhile, the collarbone of the frog is known as the clavicle. It is located anterior to the coracoid, which is a bone flared at the median end, posteromedial to the scapula.
Defined as the bone that connects the humerus with the clavicle, the scapula or shoulder bone is located beside the clavicle. Meanwhile, situated superior to the scapula is the suprascapula or the shoulder blades, which is seen on the back of the frog skeleton.
The head of the humerus fits into the glenoid fossa. It is a shallow depression on a bone into which another bone fits to form a joint, especially on that scapula.
Last, for the pectoral girdle, an opening that separates the clavicle and coracoid bones of the frog is observable. This is called the fenestra.
In understanding the bones of the pectoral girdle, you could use this sentence as a guide. Pascal, Paul, and Glenda paid for their Oreo in a can. We shall now proceed to the pelvic girdle. The pelvic girdle is the V-shaped bone articulates with the sacral vertebra and supports the posterior limbs. It has a left and right half.
First of the set of the bones in the pelvic girdle is the ilium, which is a large bone at the bottom of the spine that supports the frog's powerful legs. It also gives the frog an unusual hump low on its back.
A cup-like depression formed by the union of the three pairs of bones is the acetabulum. It receives the head of the femur.
Next is a short posterior bone on the dorsal side of the pelvic girdle. This is called the ischium. The ischiatic symphysis, meanwhile, is a joint in which the component bones are immovable, held together by a strong and fibrous cartilage.
Furthermore, pubis is another cartilage on the ventral side of the pelvic girdle. A unique joint consisting of fibrocartilaginous disc sandwiched between the articular surfaces of the pubic bones is the pubic symphysis.
Meanwhile, for understanding the bones of the pelvic girdle, Ishmael pushed Sasha down the stairs that caused her to walk with a limp. The anterior limb or the forelimb consists of different bones. The head of the humerus fits the glenoid fossa of the pectoral girdle, similar in function to that of the acetabulum, which articulates with the head of femur.
The deltoid is attached by tendons to the skeleton at the scapula and the humerus. It is widest at the top of the shoulder and narrows to its apex as it travels down the arm.
The bone in the upper arm is the humerus. It runs from the shoulder to the condyle or to the elbow of the frog. This is the so-called condyle. It is a round prominence at the end of the humerus of the frog.
Moving to the middle part, the bone of the forearm is called the radioulna. It represents the fusion of the separate radius and ulna. The line found in between the radius and ulna is called the longitudinal groove.
Connecting the wrist to the forearm are the ordinary carpals, consisting of 2 rows of 6 small bones. 3 bones can be seen on most skeletons. The centrale, ulnare, and the radiale are some of them.
There are bones of the palm consisting of 4 slender bones and a rudiment of the thumb. These are the metacarpals that act as a bridge between the wrist and fingers, forming the framework of the hand.
And lastly, at the distal end, The phalanges of the forelimb are the bones of the fingers consisting of small pieces of bones arranged linearly.
The bones of the forelimbs. After taking photos of the Hermes logo, Clara ran back home and used the picture as a decoy because she can't afford a new one.
Frogs can easily adapt at the surroundings using its hind limb or the posterior limbs. The main reason is that it can jump high to easily escape its predator and also to catch its prey.
To start, the head of the femur is first in the list. It fits the acetabulum in the pelvic girdle.
Next to it is the bone of the thigh, or the largest bone in the body. It is called the femur. It functions to support the weight of the body and allows motions of the legs of the frog.
Moving down from the femur, another long leg bone of a frog provides a strong platform for leaping and swimming. These are called the tibiofibula.
Like the ordinary carpals of the forelimb, the hind limbs have the ordinary tarsals. These are the bones of the ankle consisting of 2 rows of bones used to fold up more tightly and give a stronger spring. The outer tarsal is the calcaneum or fibulare. It is the bigger bone. The inner tarsal is the astragalus or tibiale, which is a smaller bone, while a spur of cartilage arising from the inner side of the metatarsals is known as calcar.
Moreover, the metatarsals are the 5 long cylindrical bones of the sole articulating with the posterior limb to the tarsals. It provides movement in the hind limb of the frog.
And at the distal end of the feet are the phalanges of hind limb, which are obviously longer than those of the forelimb. These are the bones of the webbed toes consisting of bones arranged linearly.
Lastly, in memorizing the bones of the hind limbs, note that not all females hate tofu. Actually, I love tofu. So our acronym would be, not all females hate tofu.
Are you ready to hear the last question? Okay, let's go to my last question. And it is regarding the skeletal system of the frog. Get ready, this one is going to be an easy peasy. If we humans have what we call fingers, what is its counterpart in frogs? Is it A, femur, B, phalanges of the forelimb, or letter C, the triceps femoris? The correct answer is the phalanges of the forelimb.
So I guess after taking 4 different adventurous trips in this instructional video, you guys have learned the body parts and body systems of the frog. We have discussed the external morphology of the frog with Cherika, the muscular system with Nergiel, the internal parts with Franz, and lastly, the skeletal system with Mayan.
Yes, and we hope that you have gained many insights from us instead of just appreciating how body systems work in order to produce a well-designed and functional organism.
And guys, we also hope that you guys have enjoyed answering our glitch questions. So how many points have you got, guys?
Me, I got 4.
I got 3.
Same here. I got 4 correct answers. How about you guys? If you got them all right, good for you. You're one step closer to understanding the functions of the different parts of the frog.
That's right, Mayan. And always remember that no matter how big or small one is, as long as we are gifted by these body systems, we'll be able to live and perpetuate.
Yes, indeed. It is also our message to keep these frogs reproducing because they are giving us the chance to study them as well as to relate their structures to ourselves.
And that concludes our instructional video on the different body systems of the frog.
Don't forget to give us support by clicking like,
leaving your thoughts through your comments, sharing this video to your family and friends, and by clicking the subscribe button down below.
Thank you guys for watching!
Have a nice day and peace out. See you in our next videos. Goodbye!
Are you stuck in the problem? Here to give an answer. I'm sure you're gonna learn them, and things would be much better. Is it to teach you all yourself? Or should the body organize? Zoology is made it seem this is for you and me. Let's go. Zoology is for you and me, for you and me. So while you sit and watch me, I keep teaching you more, keep teaching you more. Just get your notebook and your book.